I have another book to read with you, and this is How the Grinch Stole Christmas by Dr. Seuss. Every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot. But the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch hated Christmas the whole Christmas season. Now, please don't ask me why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be perhaps that his shoes were too tight. But I think the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve hating the Whos, staring down from his cave with a sour, grinchy frown, a warm lighted windows below in the town, for he knew that every Who in Whoville beneath was busy now hanging a mistletoe wreath. And they're hanging their stockings, he snarled with a sneer. Tomorrow is Christmas. It's practically here. Then he growled, his Grinch fingers nervously drumming. I must find a way to stop Christmas from coming. For tomorrow, he knew, all the Who girls and boys would wake bright and early. They'd rush for their toys. And then, the noise. Oh, the noise. And that's what he hated. The noise. Then the Who's young and old would sit down for a feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast. They'd feast on Who pudding and rare Who roast beef, which is something the Grinch couldn't stand in the least. And then they'd do something he liked least of all. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, would stand close together with Christmas bells ringing. They'd stand hand in hand, and the Whos would start singing. They'd sing, and they'd sing, and they'd sing. And the more Grinch thought about the Who Christmas sing, the more the Grinch thought, I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years now, I've put up with it now. I must stop Christmas from coming. But how? Then he got an idea, an awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea. I know just what to do, the Grinch laughed with his throat, and he made a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat. Then he chuckled and clucked, what a great cringy trick. With this coat and this hat, I'll look just like St. Nick. All I need is a reindeer. The Grinch looked around, but since reindeer are scarce, there were none to be found. Did that stop the old Grinch? No, the Grinch simply said, if I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. So he called his dog Max, and he took out some red thread, and he tied a big horn on the top of his head. Then he loaded up some bags and some old empty sacks on a ramshackle sleigh, and he hitched up old Max. Then the Grinch said, giddy up, and the sleigh started down towards the homes where the Whos were lay a-snooze in their town. All the windows were dark, quiet snow filled the air. All the Whos were dreaming sweet dreams without care. And then he came to the first little house on the square. This is stop number 1, the old Grinchy Claus hissed, and he climbed onto the roof, empty bags in his fists. Then he slid down the chimney, a rather tight pinch, but if Santa could do it, then so could the Grinch. He got stuck only once for a moment or two, then he stuck his head out of the chimney of the fireplace flue, where the little Who stockings hung all in a row. These stockings, he grinned, are the first things to go. Then he slithered and slunk in a smile most unpleasant around the whole room, and he took every present, pop guns and bicycles, roller skates and drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorns and plums. He stuffed them in a bag, then the Grinch very nimbly stuffed all the bags, one by one, up the chimney. Then he slunk to the icebox and took the Who's feast. He took the Who pudding. He took the roast beef. He cleaned out that icebox quick as a flash. Why, that Grinch even took their last can of Who hash. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee. And now, grinned the Grinch, I will stuff up the tree. And the Grinch grabbed the tree and he started to shove. When he heard a small sound like the coo of a dove, he turned around fast and he saw a small Who, Cindy Lou Who was no more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter, who got out of bed for a cold cup of water. She stared at the Grinch and she said, Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why? But you know that old Grinch, he was so smart and so slick. He thought up a lie, and he thought it up quick. "Why, my sweet little tot," the fink Santa Claus lied, "there's a light on this tree that won't light on one side, so I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, and then I'll bring it back here." And his fib fooled the child, and he patted her head, and he got her a drink and sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup, he went to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. The last thing he took was the log for their fire, and then he went up the chimney himself, the old liar. On their walls he left nothing but hooks and some wire, and the one speck of food he had left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse. Then he did the same thing to all the other Who's houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who's mouses. It was 1:15, all the Who's still abed, all the Who's still a snooze, when he packed up his sled. He packed it up with their presents, their ribbons, their wrappings, the tags, and the tinsel, the trimmings, and the trappings. 3,000 feet up to the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode with his load to the tip-top to dump it. "Pooh, pooh, to the Who's," the Grinch said, was grinchily humming, "finding out now that no Christmas is humming. They just waking up, and I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open for a minute or two. Then the Who's down in Whoville will all cry, 'Boo, hoo.'" "That's a noise," grinned the Grinch, "that I simply must hear." So he paused, and the Grinch put his hand to his ear. And he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, and it started to grow. But the sound wasn't sad. Why, the sound was merry. It couldn't be so. It was very merry, very. He stared down at Whoville. The Grinch popped his eyes, and then he shook when what he saw was a shocking surprise. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. They hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came, somehow or another. It came just the same. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. He puzzled 3 hours till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought something that he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville, they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light, and he brought back the toys and the food and the feast, and he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beef. The end.